Imagine for a moment waking up in complete darkness, your lungs gasping for air as your hands claw at the wooden walls surrounding you. This wasn't just a nightmare, it was a very real fear for countless people throughout history, so much so that ancient cultures devised bizarre and unsettling burial rituals to prevent it. From safety coffins with bells to graves lined with knives aimed at the chest, our ancestors went to extraordinary lengths to avoid the terror of being buried alive. But these rituals weren't just about practicality. They were mirrors reflecting humanity's deepest fears, fears that still haunt us today. Burial customs have always been more than just a way to lay the dead to rest. They're a window into the collective psyche of a culture, revealing what kept people awake at night. Think about it. Why would someone nail a corpse's shroud to the coffin or place heavy stones on a grave? These weren't random acts, they were desperate attempts to guard against the unknown, to quiet the gnawing dread of what might lurk beyond death. And what's truly chilling is how many of these rituals echo modern anxieties. The fear of isolation, the terror of the unseen, the desperation to control the uncontrollable, these aren't just ancient concerns. They're the same shadows that follow us now, dressed in different clothes. In this journey, we'll uncover 24 burial rituals so unsettling, so eerily familiar, they'll make you question how much has really changed. From vampire burials where the dead were pinned down with iron rods to corpse roads, meant to confuse vengeful spirits, each one tells a story of fear written in bones and dirt. But here's the real question. What do these rituals say about us? Are we so different from those who came before? Or do we just hide our fears behind modern science and steel caskets? Stick around, because by the end, you might find yourself looking over your shoulder wondering if the past is ever truly buried. In medieval Europe, the fear of the dead returning wasn't just superstition, it was a full-blown obsession. Imagine digging up a grave only to find a skeleton with a brick shoved between its jaws, an iron stake driven through its chest, or its head neatly severed and placed between its legs. These weren't acts of desecration, they were desperate attempts to stop the dead from crawling back. Archaeologists call them vampire burials, and they reveal a chilling truth. Our ancestors weren't just afraid of death. They were terrified of what came after. Take the infamous Vampire of Venice, a 16th century woman buried with a brick forced into her mouth. At the time, plague ravaged cities, and people believed the dead could spread disease by chewing through their shrouds, rising as literal monsters. The brick was a gruesome solution, silencing her forever. But this wasn't just about disease. Societies on the brink of collapse often see the dead as symbols of chaos. When crops failed, when war came, when the world felt out of control, blaming restless corpses gave people a target for their terror. Sound familiar? Today, we might not fear literal vampires, but pandemics and societal breakdowns still haunt us. We just call them by different names. What's even more unsettling is how widespread these rituals were. In Poland, skeletons were found with sickles across their throats, a brutal guarantee they couldn't sit up. In Bulgaria, graves were pinned down with heavy stones, as if the dead were wild animals needing restraint. These weren't isolated acts of paranoia, they were systemic, a cultural reflex against the unknown. And the parallels don't end there. Modern zombie movies, our obsession with contagion narratives, even the way we quarantine the sick, it's all rooted in that same primal fear, the dread of something lurking in the dark, waiting to pull us under. But here's the twist, vampire burials weren't just about fear, they were about control, nailing a corpse into its coffin, weighing it down with rocks. These were ways to impose order on a world that felt random and cruel. And isn't that what we still do? We build higher walls, stockpile supplies, invent new technologies, all to convince ourselves we're safe. The tools change, but the impulse remains. So the next time you watch a horror movie or scroll through news about a new virus, remember, the skeletons with stakes through their hearts weren't just folklore. They were a mirror, and the reflection might still be staring back at us. Of course, Europe wasn't alone in these fears. Across the globe, cultures developed their own ways to keep the dead where they belonged, some even more extreme. In Japan, they buried the deceased face down, trapping vengeful spirits underground. In Greece, they placed coins on corpses' eyes, not just as payment for the underworld, but as weights to keep their souls from wandering. Every method whispered the same unsettling truth. Humanity has always been afraid of what it can't see, and sometimes the most terrifying things aren't the monsters themselves, but the lengths we'll go to keep them at bay. High on the windswept plateaus of Tibet, a ritual unfolds that would shock many modern observers, yet speaks profoundly to our uneasy relationship with death. Sky burials, where human remains are placed on mountaintops for vultures to consume, might seem gruesome at first glance, but for Tibetan Buddhists, this practice embodies a radical acceptance of life's impermanence. One monk described it simply: the body is just an empty vessel. Why cling to what the soul has already left behind? This ritual cuts to the heart of something modern societies often avoid: the raw physicality of death. In the West, we embalm, encase in steel caskets, and preserve graves under manicured lawns, as if we could delay nature's inevitable reclamation. But sky burials force us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Every culture grapples with mortality, but not all do it by handing their loved ones to the elements. The vultures aren't seen as desecrators, they're called sky chariots, lifting the soul toward enlightenment while returning the body to the cycle of life. Ecologically, the practice is startlingly efficient. No land is wasted on cemeteries, no toxins leach into soil from embalming fluids. In a world now haunted by climate change, there's an eerie prescience to this ancient zero-waste approach. Yet when photographs of sky burials surfaced online years ago, the outrage was immediate. Comment sections filled with cries of "barbaric," a proof of how deeply Western taboos run. But here's what's revealing: our discomfort isn't really about the ritual itself. It's about our own unresolved fears. We hide death behind hospital curtains and funeral home makeup, sterilizing what Tibetan cultures openly acknowledge: that decay is natural, inevitable, even sacred. Modern green burials are slowly gaining traction, yet even these feel tame compared to sky burials' visceral honesty. Perhaps that's why the practice fascinates us. It holds up a mirror to our own denial. The contrast raises a larger question. From Tibetan mountaintops to Egyptian mummification, why do human responses to death vary so wildly? Some cultures mummify to preserve, others expose bones to the open air. But beneath the differences lies a universal struggle: the need to make meaning from the unbearable fact that flesh doesn't last. Whether we cage our dead in concrete vaults or offer them to the wind, every ritual whispers the same desperate hope: that somehow, in letting go, we might find peace. Which makes you wonder, in our age of cryonics and digital immortality, have we really moved beyond ancient fears? Or have we just swapped iron stakes for hard drives, still scrambling to outrun the one truth every burial ritual, no matter how strange, forces us to face? The ancient Egyptians didn't just bury their dead, they engineered immortality. For 3,000 years, they perfected the art of mummification, turning human remains into eternal vessels through a gruesome 70-day process of brain extraction, organ jarring, and chemical preservation. But this obsession with halting decay wasn't just about religion, it was a battle against time itself, a struggle we're still fighting today. Look at the parallels. Modern anti-aging creams, cryonics, even social media filters, they're all echoes of that same desperate urge to preserve what time inevitably takes. The Egyptians used natron salt to dry flesh. We inject Botox to freeze it. They wrapped bodies in linen to maintain form. We use cosmetic surgery to sculpt it. The tools have changed, but the fear remains identical. The terror of becoming unrecognizable, of being erased by decay. Then there's the curse of the Pharaohs, the belief that disturbing a mummy brings catastrophe. When Tutankhamun's tomb was opened in 1922, a string of deaths among the excavation team sparked global panic. Newspapers blamed supernatural retribution, ignoring mundane explanations like mold spores in the tomb. Sound familiar? Swap Pharaoh's curse for Friday the 13th or broken mirrors, and you've got the same human instinct to assign meaning to coincidence, to see patterns where there might only be chaos. Modern technology hasn't dispelled these myths, it's given them new life. Recent CT scans of mummies reveal intricate details: arterial disease, dental abscesses, even evidence of ancient surgeries. Yet for all their scientific precision, these studies often get framed in eerily mystical terms. Headlines whisper of secrets the ancients took to their graves, as if the dead might still retaliate for being exposed. It's a reminder, even in an age of MRI machines, we still project our fears onto the past. But not all cultures fought decay. Some embraced it, like the Taraja people of Indonesia, who keep deceased relatives in their homes for months or even years, dressing and feeding them as though they're merely ill. Where Egyptians saw a body as something to embalm, the Taraja see it as a bridge between worlds, gradually transitioning through decomposition. The contrast couldn't be starker. One culture wages war against time, the other surrenders to it. Which approach haunts you more? The mummy sealed in gold or the corpse sitting at the dinner table? Both force us to confront the same unanswerable question. When we look at the dead, are we seeing them or our own terrified reflections? Deep beneath the churches of 17th century Europe, a bizarre form of devotion glittered in the candlelight skeletons dressed in gold, draped in silk and crowned with gemstones. These were the Catacomb saints, anonymous Roman skeletons exhumed from underground burial chambers and transformed into dazzling objects of worship. With delicate fingers wired into graceful poses and eye sockets filled with glass pearls, these holy cadavers became centerpieces of Catholic devotion, a stark contrast to Protestantism's rejection of religious icons. But beneath the jewels and reverence lay something far more human, our timeless obsession with transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. The craftsmanship was astonishing. Artisans spent months, sometimes years, painting intricate designs directly onto bones, weaving strands of silver through rib cages, even crafting wigs from real human hair. One saint in Switzerland wears a gown stitched with thousands of seed pearls. Another in Germany has a golden palm frond resting delicately in its skeletal hand. Yet the most striking detail, many of these skeletons weren't even verified martyrs. The church often assigned them heroic backstories, turning anonymous remains into celebrated figures overnight. If that sounds familiar, it should. Replace jeweled bones with red carpet outfits and fabricated backstories with PR campaigns, and you've got the cult of celebrity in a nutshell. This wasn't just about faith, it was about power. At the height of the Protestant Reformation, when reformers mocked Catholic relic worship, these bejeweled skeletons became propaganda. Their opulence was a defiant statement. See how glorious the true faith is. But the irony runs deep. While Protestants accused Catholics of materialism, these saints became literal embodiments of wealth and spectacle. Fast forward to today, and the parallels are unsettling. In an age where social media influencers curate their lives like relics and fame is often measured in digital worship, have we really moved past the catacomb saints or just swapped churches for Instagram? Yet not all cultures flaunted their dead. Some did the exact opposite. In the cliffside tombs of China's Bo people, coffins were suspended high above the ground, not to display but to hide. The logic was simple. By placing the dead out of reach, they avoided attracting malevolent spirits. Similarly, the Zoroastrians of ancient Persia built towers of silence, where bodies were left exposed to scavenger birds but hidden from living eyes. No jewels, no processions, just quiet disappearance. This tension between display and concealment speaks to something fundamental. Whether we bedazzle skeletons or hide them in cliffs, every ritual reveals how we negotiate the same primal question: how close should the living be to the dead? The catacomb saints scream for attention. The Bo people's coffins whisper for secrecy. Both, in their own ways, are attempts to control the uncontrollable, to decide whether death should be a spectacle or a shadow. So the next time you see a viral post or a celebrity scandal, ask yourself, are we so different from those who gilded skulls centuries ago? We may not worship skeletons anymore, but we still turn ordinary people into icons, and just like the catacomb saints, their brilliance often hides something far more fragile beneath. High in the mist-shrouded cliffs of China's Yangtze River and the limestone caves of the Philippines, wooden coffins dangle precariously over sheer drops, some for over 2,000 years. These hanging burials weren't just architectural marvels, they were solutions to very real human fears. For the Bo people of ancient China, placing coffins on vertical cliffs served two urgent purposes: protecting ancestors from grave robbers and conserving precious farmland. Imagine living in a world where arable land was so scarce that even the dead couldn't claim it. Every burial plot dug into fertile soil meant less food for the living, a dilemma that echoes today's housing crises, where sky-high real estate prices force cities to build upward instead of outward. The engineering behind these coffins was astonishing. Workers scaled cliffs using rope ladders, hauling hollowed-out logs weighing hundreds of pounds to natural crevices or carved ledges. Some coffins were stacked like bookshelves, others balanced on wooden stakes driven into rock faces. But this wasn't just about practicality. The higher the burial, the closer the soul was believed to be to heaven, a spiritual elevator shaft carved by nature. The Bo people saw cliffs as bridges between earth and sky, where ancestors could watch over villages without competing for resources. Yet there's a darker layer to these aerial tombs. Many cultures that practiced cliff burials also took extreme measures to secure the dead in their coffins, strapping bodies with ropes, nailing shrouds shut, even binding limbs with cloth. Why go to such lengths if the coffins were already inaccessible? Because the fear wasn't just about thieves. It was about the dead themselves. Across Asia, legends told of corpses climbing out of their cliffside coffins, returning as vengeful spirits. The height wasn't just practical, it was a supernatural containment strategy. Modern cities mirror this duality in unsettling ways. Today's skyscrapers solve land scarcity just as cliff coffins did. Yet our high-rises are filled with their own ghosts, empty investment properties, and unaffordable homes. We've swapped ropes and stakes for zoning laws and security deposits, but the core tension remains: how to honor the past without suffocating the present. The most poignant parallel lies in what happened to the Bo people themselves. Despite their ingenious burials, they vanished from history, likely assimilated or displaced by war. Their hanging coffins endure as silent reminders. No solution, no matter how ingenious, lasts forever. And perhaps that's the deepest fear these cliffs reflect. not just of thieves or ghosts, but of being forgotten entirely. Which makes you wonder, when future civilizations dig up our towering cemeteries of steel and glass, what will they say about our own tangled relationship with space, security, and the sacred? In the frozen soil of medieval Scandinavia, gravediggers sometimes performed a grim task, rolling corpses onto their stomachs before burial, crossing their limbs behind their backs like knotted ropes. These weren't ordinary funerals, they were precautions against witches, criminals, or anyone deemed dangerous enough to claw their way back from the grave. To communities living under the threat of famine and plague, burying someone face down wasn't just superstition, it was survival. The logic was chillingly simple. A corpse that couldn't rise couldn't seek revenge. But who earned this post-mortem punishment? Often, it was society's outcasts, midwives with knowledge of herbs, the mentally ill, or those who simply angered the wrong neighbor. Sound familiar? Replace witch with conspiracy theorist or political dissident, and the pattern holds. When societies fracture under pressure, we still look for someone to blame. The crossed limbs and prone burials of Scandinavia whisper a dark truth. Fear doesn't just bury the dead, it buries the inconvenient. Then there were the Draugr, Norse mythology's undead monsters. Unlike vampires or zombies, these creatures weren't mindless. They were calculating, vengeful, often returning to punish those who wronged them in life. Legends describe them as impossibly heavy, their bodies swollen with corruption, a grotesque metaphor for unaddressed guilt. Communities didn't just fear the Draugr's strength, they feared what it represented. Every vengeful corpse was a walking accusation, a reminder of unresolved injustices. Modern parallels lurk beneath the surface. Consider how quickly rumors spread during crises, witch hunts rebranded as hashtags, whispers of patient zero during pandemics. The tools have changed, but the impulse remains. Isolate the threat, silence the troublemaker, bury the evidence, sometimes literally, which makes Scandinavia's quieter burial customs even more revealing. Some graves held corpses with stones placed carefully in their mouths, a practice called a Potropic burial. The stone wasn't just a weight, it was a gag, preventing the dead from speaking curses. Others had their feet bound with strips of cloth, a symbolic hobbling to stop them from wandering. These weren't acts of hatred. They were desperate negotiations, attempts to placate the dead without angering them further. Here's what's haunting: we still ritualize silence, from gag orders in legal settlements to the way societies sideline uncomfortable truths. The mechanics of suppression haven't disappeared. They've just traded grave dirt for paperwork, so the next time you hear someone dismissed as a crazy conspiracy theorist, or watch a scandal get memory hold, remember the bound limbs and mouth stones of Scandinavia. The methods may be cleaner now, but the fear, that hasn't decayed one bit. In the dusty plains of ancient Mesopotamia, death wasn't just met with silence, it was met with a cacophony. Archaeologists have uncovered graves filled with shattered pottery, broken figurines, and even the remains of musical instruments deliberately smashed atop burial sites. These weren't accidents or signs of disrespect. They were carefully orchestrated rituals designed to drown out the whispers of the dead. Cuneiform tablets from the period describe restless ghosts as beings who clung to the living through sound, their voices slithering into the minds of the grieving. The solution: a burial so loud, so chaotic, it left spirits disoriented, unable to find their way back. Think about the irony. Today, we complain about noise pollution, the relentless buzz of traffic, the ping of notifications, the overwhelming flood of information. But 4,000 years ago, noise was a weapon against the unknown. Mesopotamians believed that just as loud sounds could scare away wild animals, they could repel supernatural threats. A shattered vase wasn't just debris, it was a sonic barrier, its fragments scattering echoes like a metaphysical alarm system. The parallels don't end there. Modern sleep aids, white noise machines, ambient playlists serve a similar purpose. We drown out intrusive thoughts with soundscapes, masking the mental ghosts that keep us awake. Even our obsession with constant background noise, podcasts, music, the hum of a TV left on, mirrors those ancient burials. The methods have modernized, but the fear remains. Silence is where the unwanted things linger. Yet Mesopotamia took it further. Some texts describe corpses bound with ropes, their jaws tied shut with strips of linen. Restless ghosts weren't just confused by noise, they were physically restrained, their bodies treated like rogue animals needing taming. One particularly chilling account tells of a widow who buried her husband with clay tablets pressed into his hands, inscribed with spells to tie his mouth and seal his limbs. It wasn't enough to disorient the dead, they had to be immobilized. This duality, noise and restraint, reflects a deeper anxiety. When faced with the uncontrollable, humans oscillate between two instincts: overwhelm it or cage it. Today, we drown out existential dread with endless scrolling, while therapy apps promise to tame anxiety with guided exercises. The tools are digital now, but the blueprint is Mesopotamian. Which makes you wonder, when we shatter our own modern pottery, deleting apps, turning off notifications, are we any closer to peace? Or are we just replicating ancient rituals, hoping the right combination of noise and control will finally keep the ghosts at bay? In the windswept hills of Ireland, farmers once stacked stones into towering piles, not as memorials, but as barricades. These cairns formed what locals called ghost walls, believed to imprison restless spirits that might otherwise creep into the world of the living. Each carefully placed stone served as both prison and warning, creating a physical boundary between the safe and the supernatural. The logic was brutally straightforward. If you couldn't destroy a threat, you could at least contain it. What's striking is how these ancient walls mirror modern attempts to control the unseen. Gated communities with their high fences, digital firewalls blocking unwanted intrusions, even the way we compartmentalize grief. They're all variations on the same theme. The Irish didn't just fear ghosts, they feared chaos seeping through the cracks of everyday life. Today, we might not stack stones, but we still build walls, literal and figurative, to keep out what unsettles us. Yet other cultures took the opposite approach. During China's Hungry Ghost Festival, gates between worlds are said to swing wide open. Families lay out feasts for wandering spirits, offering joss paper money and burning effigies of luxury goods, not to trap the dead, but to appease them. Where Irish cairns sought to confine, this festival acknowledges a harder truth. Some forces can't be walled away. Better to feed the hunger than risk its wrath. The contrast reveals a universal tension. Do we barricade ourselves against perceived threats, or do we negotiate with them? Modern security systems and ancient cairns share the same underlying anxiety, the fear of vulnerability. But the Hungry Ghost Festival suggests another path, one where respect, not resistance, becomes the shield. This duality extends to how cultures disguised graves altogether. In parts of medieval Europe, tombstones were carved to resemble everyday objects: millstones, bread loaves, even barrels camouflaging death in plain sight. The goal wasn't just to avoid attracting spirits, it was to make grief less intrusive, to let the living move on without constant reminders. Today, we see echoes in minimalist grave markers or the trend of green burials that blend graves seamlessly into nature. The through line is clear. Whether we wall off the dead, feed them, or hide them, every ritual grapples with the same question: how do we live alongside what we can't control? The stones of Ireland and the feasts of China offer two answers, but the fear they address hasn't faded. It's just taken new forms in the fences we build, the boundaries we draw, and the quiet ways we still try to outwit the dark. The Victorian era had a peculiar way of confronting the most unbearable kind of loss, the kind without closure. Along the foggy coasts of England, cemeteries still hold rows of meticulously carved headstones marking empty graves. These weren't oversights, they were deliberate memorials for sailors swallowed by the sea, their bodies never recovered. Families would gather at these hollow tombs, tending to them as if the earth beneath held something more than silence. What's haunting isn't just the grief, it's the ritual's eerie resemblance to modern digital memorials. Scroll through social media today, and you'll find profiles frozen in time, filled with comments like "miss you every day," left on pages of the long vanished. The technology has changed, but the impulse remains. When there's no body to bury, we still build a place to mourn. Psychologists call this ambiguous loss, grief without proof, without the finality of a corpse. In Victorian times, the fake grave provided a focal point, a physical space to direct sorrow. Today, we light virtual candles and post-anniversary tributes online. Both rituals reveal a hard truth. The human mind struggles to process absence without a container. A headstone, even an empty one, draws a line around the chaos of grief. A Facebook profile turned memorial does the same. The danger, though, lies in what happens when these placeholders become replacements. Victorian mourners sometimes treated their false graves as if the dead were truly beneath them, whispering secrets to the dirt. Modern mourners refresh vanished loved ones' pages, hoping against logic for a new post, yet some cultures rejected the idea of containment altogether. Take the Zoroastrian Towers of Silence, where bodies were left exposed to vultures until only bones remained, or Tibetan Sky Burials, where the dead were disassembled by nature itself. These weren't acts of disregard, they were radical acknowledgements that the body is temporary, unworthy of clinging to. The Victorians built empty tombs to anchor their grief. These traditions dissolved the anchor entirely. The contrast forces a difficult question. Is it healthier to ritualize absence or to let it dissipate? Modern forensics now recover once unfindable bodies using DNA and sonar, offering closure to families who waited decades. But for every solved case, thousands remain open, their digital memorials glowing endlessly in the cloud. Maybe that's the real purpose of fake graves, past and present, not to deceive, but to give shape to the shapeless. After all, grief needs a place to stand, even if that place holds nothing but air. Which makes you wonder, when we light a pixelated candle online or scrub a headstone free of moss, are we honoring the dead or bargaining with the void? The answer might lie not in the rituals themselves, but in what we do when we walk away. Do we leave our grief at the grave or carry it with us, lighter somehow? The Victorians never really answered that, neither have we, and then there were those who took dissolution further still. In the jungles of Amazonia, certain tribes practiced endocannibalism, consuming the ashes of the dead mixed into food. It was the ultimate act of keeping loved ones close, literally incorporating them into the bodies of the living. Where Victorians built lies of stone, these cultures embraced a visceral truth: nothing truly disappears. It just changes form. The irony is profound. Today, we have companies that compress cremated remains into diamonds or launch them into space. Modern attempts to transform loss into something tangible, even beautiful. But the goal isn't so different from those Amazonian rituals or the empty graves of sailors. We're all just searching for a way to hold on without being crushed by the weight of what's gone. Whether it's a locked Facebook profile or ashes pressed into glass, every memorial whispers the same plea: don't let them vanish, not completely, not yet. Picture this, a flaming longship cutting through the darkness, its sails glowing like a second sunset as it drifts toward the horizon. For the Vikings, this wasn't just a funeral, it was a launch sequence. Ship burials were cosmic one-way tickets, with the vessel serving as both coffin and spacecraft, ferrying warriors to Valhalla's mead halls or Freya's field of eternal battle. The Norse didn't just bury their dead, they programmed their afterlife coordinates. The parallels to modern space burials are almost eerie. Companies like Celestis now send cremated remains into orbit, promising clients their loved ones will journey among the stars. Compare that to the saga of Odin whispering to the dead, "You shall ride the wind's road, the whale's way, till you reach the hall that knows no sunset." Both visions frame death as a voyage, whether on burning oak or carbon fiber satellites. Even the rituals mirror each other. Vikings placed weapons and treasures aboard ships for the afterlife. Today, families upload digital messages and DNA samples to accompany orbital ashes. The packaging has upgraded from dragon-prowed longships to Falcon rockets, but the dream remains unchanged, to slip gravity's grasp and become stardust. Yet ship burials were never solitary events. When a chieftain died, entire communities gathered to push the vessel into the water, often sacrificing horses or servants to join the expedition. The Icelandic Eyjabygja saga describes a funeral where the crowd's wails drowned out the crashing waves, a collective send-off for a journey no one could witness. Flash forward to modern space memorials, when NASA New Horizons probe carried ashes beyond Pluto in 2015, thousands tuned in to watch the launch. We've replaced sacrificial offerings with live streams, but the need to mourn together persists. This communal aspect reveals something deeper. Both Viking and space burials transform grief into spectacle, a shared story that softens death's isolation. Consider how sci-fi franchises from Star Trek to The Expanse depict funerals in space. Officers gathered on holographic decks, scattering ashes into nebulae. These scenes borrow directly from Norse mythology's emphasis on witness and ceremony. Even Elon Musk's whimsical plan to die on Mars taps into that ancient yearning, not just for exploration, but for an audience to make the ending meaningful. But here's where the traditions diverge. Viking ships were burned to ensure no remnants tempted the living to disturb the dead. Modern space burials, by contrast, leave physical traces, capsules circling Earth, names etched on lunar landers. We want our dead both gone and preserved, orbiting forever like celestial souvenirs. Perhaps that's the ultimate paradox. The Vikings sought clean finality, while we cling to the illusion that technology can cheat oblivion. The most poignant ship burial wasn't for a warrior, but a child. Archaeologists in Norway discovered a small boat buried with a young girl around the year 900. Her grave held toys instead of weapons, a wooden horse, a tiny comb, proof that even the fiercest cultures tempered their afterlife myths with tenderness. Today, parents who lose children sometimes plant trees from bio-urns or commission memorial star registries. The scale has shifted from fjords to galaxies, but the impulse is identical: to gift the unimaginable loss a destination, a shape, a story that hurts slightly less to tell. Which makes you wonder, when our own descendants look back at these rituals, will they see bravery or denial? The Vikings knew their ships burned. We pretend ours might someday be recovered. Both, in their way, are acts of love disguised as logistics, using fire and physics to say what words never could. You mattered too much to simply disappear. In the highland rainforests of Papua New Guinea, the four people practiced a ritual so intimate it blurred the line between love and survival. When a relative died, women and children would consume their brain tissue in a solemn act called endocannibalism, not out of hunger but belief. By eating the dead, they thought the essence of that person, their courage, wisdom, even laughter, would live on inside them. It was the ultimate refusal to let go, a biological heirloom passed not through genes but through ritual ingestion. At first glance, this seems worlds apart from modern anxieties, but consider how obsessed we've become with preserving identity, digitally archiving voices, cloning pets, even cryogenically freezing brains in hopes of future resurrection. The four sought continuity through consumption. We chase it through technology. Both are desperate attempts to cheat erasure, to convince ourselves that nothing truly ends. Then came Kuru. In the mid-20th century, this fatal neurological disease ravaged four communities, causing tremors, dementia, and eventually death. Scientists traced it to prions misfolded proteins in consumed brain tissue that acted like biological grenades. The very ritual meant to preserve memory became a vector for oblivion. Here's where the cautionary tale sharpens. The four weren't ignorant. They modified practices once they understood the risk, showing how even the most sacred traditions can adapt in the face of evidence. The Kuru epidemic mirrors modern health crises where cultural practices collide with science, anti-vaccine movements, climate denialism. We too cling to comforting beliefs despite mounting proof of their dangers. The difference: our rituals are less about consuming the past than curating it. Social media profiles frozen in time, AI chatbots mimicking lost loved ones. We've swapped biological absorption for digital preservation, but the goal remains unchanged: to keep the departed within reach. Yet not all cultures sought to internalize the dead. Some did the opposite. In Madagascar's Famidihana tradition, families exhume relatives every few years to rewrap their bones in fresh silk, a ritual that keeps the dead present but at arm's length. Where the four incorporated, the Malagasy compartmentalized, both approaches grapple with the same question: how close is too close when it comes to the departed? This tension plays out in modern funeral trends. Green burials let bodies decompose naturally into soil, a literal return to the earth that echoes the four's physical unity with ancestors. Meanwhile, diamond cremation turns ashes into jewelry-wearable remnants that, like endocannibalism, place the dead inside the living's daily existence. The methods vary, but the heartbeat beneath them remains the same: a refusal to accept that love must end where breath does. What's haunting isn't the difference between these rituals, but their shared desperation. Whether we eat memories or encode them in algorithms, we're all just trying to build bridges across an impossible divide. The four's tragedy and their resilience reminds us that some bonds can't be sustained by biology or bites alone. Sometimes the healthiest way to honor the dead isn't to carry them within us, but to let them go. Beneath the cobblestone streets of London and Paris lie gaping wounds from history's deadliest pandemics, plague pits so vast they swallowed entire neighborhoods. During the Black Death, these mass graves were dug with brutal efficiency, bodies stacked like firewood as gravediggers collapsed from exhaustion. No prayers, no names, just a desperate race to contain the invisible enemy. Fast forward 7 centuries and the echoes are chillingly familiar. When New York City ran out of morgue space in 2020, officials deployed refrigerated trucks as makeshift burial vaults. The scale differed, but the grim calculus was identical. When death outpaces dignity, survival takes precedence over ceremony. What's revealing isn't just the parallel, it's how both eras wrestled with memory afterward. After the plague receded, medieval Europeans built charnel houses to display exhumed bones, turning anonymous remains into macabre art. The Capuchin crypt in Rome stacks thousands of skeletons in intricate patterns, a silent scream against forgetting. Compare that to today's COVID-19 memorials, empty chairs on the National Mall, a wall of hearts in London, virtual quilts where names flicker across screens. Each attempts the same impossible alchemy to transform statistical casualties into singular lives worth remembering. The rituals of quarantine reveal even darker symmetries. Venetian health officers during the Renaissance nailed shut the doors of infected homes, painting crosses as warnings. Families inside would lower baskets from windows to receive meager supplies, a precursor to modern contactless delivery. Even the Red Cross's daubed on doors find their counterpart in today's quarantine bracelets and exposure notification apps. We've swapped tar and nails for Bluetooth signals, but the message remains unchanged. Stay away, stay alive. Yet plague pits held another secret layers of soil separating the dead-like chapters in a book. Archaeologists find evidence of intermittent burials, suggesting communities returned to these sites over generations, adding new victims to old graves. This stacking of tragedies mirrors our own pandemic waves, where each surge forced fresh reckonings with triage ethics. Who gets a ventilator? Who receives vaccines first? These aren't medieval questions, they're headlines from last week. Perhaps the most poignant link lies in how both eras marked time. The Black Death birthed the Memento Mori tradition, skull carvings on pocket watches, hourglasses clutched by grim reaper statues. Clocks became mortality warnings, ticking toward an inevitable end. Today, we count pandemic milestones in Zoom birthdays and missed graduations, our calendars scarred by postponed weddings and empty holidays. Time itself became a unit of loss. The lesson of plague pits isn't just about fear, it's about resilience. In Vienna, they built a cathedral over a mass grave, its foundations literally resting on bones. The message was clear: life continues even atop unimaginable sorrow. Modern memorials strive for the same balance, honoring the dead without letting grief paralyze the living. So when you pass a park bench dedicated to a carved victim or spot a fading heart sticker on a storefront, remember, these aren't just tributes. They're proof that even in the face of faceless death, we still insist on saying, "You were here." Beneath the floorboards of medieval English churches, archaeologists have uncovered graves with an unsettling addition: tiny hourglasses nestled beside skeletons, their sand long since drained. These weren't timekeeping devices for the afterlife. They were blunt reminders carved in glass and bone. Life slips away faster than you think. The hourglass burials of the 14th century were part of a broader Memento Mori tradition, art and rituals designed to hammer home mortality's inevitability. Skulls adorned banquet tables, portraits showed beautiful women holding wilting flowers, rings bore inscriptions like, "Today me, tomorrow you." This wasn't macabre obsession, it was a cultural counterbalance to distraction, a way to jolt people into living with purpose. Sound familiar? Swap the hourglass for a smartphone timer, the skull carvings for productivity apps that track every wasted minute, and the message is eerily similar. Medieval Memento Mori and modern hustle culture share the same frenetic heartbeat, anxiety disguised as motivation. The hourglass graves whispered "Carpe Diem," just as viral tweets scream "YOLO." Both frame life as a commodity to be optimized, though one used dread of damnation while the other peddles fear of irrelevance. Even the aesthetics overlap, where monks kept skulls on their desks to stay focused. Today's entrepreneurs flaunt hustle porn, images of 4 a.m. work sessions as badges of honor. The tools have changed, but the underlying terror of time's passage remains frozen in place. Yet there's a crucial difference. Medieval Memento Mori art often depicted death as an equalizer, skeletons dragging kings and peasants alike into the grave. Modern productivity culture, by contrast, sells the illusion that with enough hustle, you can cheat time itself. The hourglass burial's message was humility. Today's grind mentality thrives on the lie of control. Perhaps that's why the quiet quitting movement resonates. It's a subconscious pushback against 7 centuries of being told every grain of sand must be monetized. This tension between acknowledging death and hiding it fuels another strange burial tradition: concealment rituals. Across Europe, families would bury loved ones face down or nail shut coffin lids, not just to prevent supernatural returns, but to make death itself less visible. Some cultures went further, disguising graves as everyday objects. In Cornwall, flat table tombs doubled as picnic spots. In Germany, tombstones were carved to look like bread loaves or barrels. The goal wasn't disrespect, it was normalization, folding death into the fabric of daily life so it lost its power to paralyze. Today's equivalent, the rise of death positivity, movements and green burials that decompose bodies into fertilizer. Both medieval concealment and modern eco-funerals aim to demystify death, though one hid it while the other integrates it. The through line is clear. Whether we bury hourglasses or plant memorial trees, we're still wrestling with the same question. How do you live fully when the sand is always running out? The answer might lie not in frantic productivity or fearful denial, but in something the hourglass graves quietly modeled: acceptance. After all, time doesn't care if you rage against it or pretend it's endless. It just flows, and the real ritual begins when you stop counting the grains. Deep beneath the bustling streets of Paris, where tourists queue for croissants and selfies, lies a hidden city of the dead, a labyrinth of tunnels stacked floor to ceiling with the bones of 6 million people. The Catacombs of Paris aren't just a burial site, they're a meticulously arranged monument to sanitized death. Skulls and femurs form macabre patterns: hearts, crosses, even faux arches, as if someone tried to organize chaos into something palatable. This wasn't random. By the late 18th century, Paris's cemeteries were overflowing, leaching disease into the water supply. The solution: empty the graves and redecorate the underworld. What's striking isn't just the scale, but the aestheticization. Bones were bleached, sorted by type, and arranged with near-architectural precision. The effect is surreal: death stripped of its messiness, transformed into a silent art exhibit. Sound familiar? Modern funeral homes do the same, with embalming and cosmetic restoration, using wax and paint to make corpses appear peaceful, as if sleeping. Both rituals serve the same purpose: to make the unthinkable bearable by dressing it in order. Yet there's irony in how these tunnels became a tourist attraction. Visitors today snap grinning photos beside walls of skulls, sipping lattes afterward as if they'd toured the Louvre. The catacombs' transformation from public health crisis to Instagram backdrop mirrors our cultural whiplash around death. 1 minute shuddering at horror movies, the next lining up to gawk at curated skeletons. It's a paradox as old as the ossuaries themselves. We're drawn to what scares us as long as it's kept at a safe, aesthetic distance. This sanitization extends beyond Europe. In Japan's Kotswage ritual, families use chopsticks to pluck bone fragments from cremation ashes, transferring them to urns with ceremonial care. Where Paris stacked bones anonymously, Japanese traditions personalize the process, yet both rituals share a common thread. They're acts of translation, turning the raw fact of decay into something manageable, even beautiful. But not all cultures hide death behind artistry. Some invite it to dinner. During Mexico's Dia de los Muertos, families prepare their ancestors' favorite meals, setting places at the table for souls who return to feast. In Sicily, locals bake bones of the dead, cookies, sweet almond treats shaped like femurs as edible offerings. These rituals don't sanitize, they celebrate decay as part of life's cycle. A Parisian skull wall whispers, "Remember you must die." A Mexican altar shouts, "They're still here." The contrast reveals a universal tension. Do we tidy death away like Parisian bones, or embrace its messiness like marigold-strewn graveyards? Modern funeral trends can't seem to decide. Green burials let bodies decompose naturally, while companies like Nectarna dissolve ashes into ocean reefs, both embracing decomposition's inevitability. Yet the billion-dollar embalming industry still thrives, proof that the catacombs' legacy endures. We still crave control, even as we flirt with surrender. Perhaps that's why ossuaries fascinate us. They're not just repositories for bones, they're mirrors reflecting how we negotiate our deepest fear. The Paris catacombs, with their eerie symmetry, offer a compromise, death made visible yet bloodless, present yet powerless. It's a trick we're still performing, whether with funeral makeup or AI-generated messages from beyond. The tools evolve, but the illusion remains. If we arrange the bones just right, maybe death won't seem so random. Maybe it'll even be beautiful. And then there are those who take feeding the dead literally. In Madagascar's Famidihana festival, families exhume relatives to wrap them in fresh shrouds, pouring rum over the bones as an offering. The ritual isn't morbid, it's familial, a way to update ancestors on marriages, births, and gossip they've missed. Where Parisian tunnels freeze time, Famidihana defies it, treating death as a revolving door. So which approach comforts more, the catacomb's silent order or the rum-soaked laughter of a Malagasy tomb? Both, in their way, are acts of love, one preserving, the other conversing. And perhaps that's the real lesson of these rituals. There's no right way to face mortality, only the ways that let us sleep at night. Whether we stack skulls or share meals with ghosts, we're all just trying to make peace with the inevitable. The bones don't care how we arrange them, but we do, desperately. In Mexico, death doesn't end a conversation, it invites one to the table. During Dia de los Muertos, families prepare feasts for ancestors, setting out plates of mole, pan de muerto, and the departed's favorite tequila. Marigold petals guide spirits home, their vibrant orange like neon signs in the afterlife, open for business. This isn't just remembrance, it's reunion. As Octavio Paz famously observed, the Mexican courts death, mocks it, caresses it, sleeps with it, celebrates it. Where other cultures flinch, Mexico embraces turning graveyards into picnic grounds and skeletons into grinning confetti. But beneath the celebration lies a quieter truth. These offerings mirror modern anxieties about distance and disconnection. In an era where families scatter across borders for work, the ritual becomes a lifeline, a way to bridge gaps that geography and time have carved. The candy skulls and poured shots aren't just symbols, they're placeholders, filling empty chairs at tables where migrant workers can't return. When a mother leaves tamales for her son who died crossing the border, or a child arranges toys for a sibling they never met, the ritual isn't about the past. It's about rewriting it, if only for one night. Yet not all cultures welcome the dead so warmly. In parts of Romania, suspected vampires were exhumed and stabbed through the heart with iron stakes. In Scotland, witches' graves were weighed down with boulders to prevent resurrection. Where Mexican altars say stay, these rituals scream leave. The contrast is stark. One culture feeds its ghosts, the other fights them. But both share a common thread, the need to negotiate with the unseen. Consider the Icelandic tradition of Utbur, the abandoning unwanted infants in the wilderness to die. These children, often born into poverty, were later feared as vengeful spirits. Families would bury them under heavy stones, not out of cruelty, but terror. The logic was circular. We cast you out, so you haunt us. Because you haunt us, we trap you. It's a heartbreaking echo of modern cycles, how neglect breeds fear, and fear justifies more neglect. What's revealing is how these punishments reflect societal guilt. Vampire stakings often targeted outsiders, the poor, the mentally ill, those who died by suicide. Their post-mortem torment was a way to purge collective shame, to say your death was your fault, not ours. Today's equivalent might be how we criminalize homelessness or overdose victims, still blaming the vulnerable for their own suffering. The tools have changed, but the impulse to punish the unquiet dead lingers. Mexico's offerings and Europe's iron stakes represent two sides of the same coin. One ritual says we miss you, the other whispers we fear what we've done. Both are conversations with the past, just in different tones. So the next time you see a Dia de los Muertos altar, look closer. The tequila isn't just for the dead, it's for the living too. A toast to the ones who got away and a plea to those who might still be watching. Remember us kindly. High above the crossroads of medieval England, iron cages swayed in the wind, not empty, but cradling the decomposing remains of executed criminals. These gibbets weren't just punishments, they were billboards. A murderer's body might hang for years, slowly shrinking to a leathery warning as travelers passed beneath. The message was brutally clear: this could be you. But what's chilling isn't just the spectacle, it's how this ancient form of deterrence mirrors modern obsessions with public shaming. Cancel culture, viral mugshots, true crime documentaries that dissect killers' lives. We've swapped iron cages for Twitter threads, but the hunger for visible justice remains. Take the case of 18th century highwayman Dick Turpin, whose gibbeted corpse drew crowds for months. People stole his teeth as macabre souvenirs, much like today's collectors bidding on serial killers' artwork. The psychology is identical, a morbid mix of fear and fascination, repulsion and reverence. Even the language overlaps. Medieval towns spoke of criminals being made an example of, while modern headlines declare someone cancelled. Both rituals use visibility as a weapon, turning punishment into theater. Yet there's a crucial difference. Gibbeting relied on the certainty of divine judgment. The corpse's decay was proof of hell's approach. Modern shaming offers no such closure. A cancelled celebrity might resurface years later, their reputation still in limbo. The gibbet's horror was finite, the internet's judgment is perpetual. This tension between finality and ambiguity bleeds into our true crime obsession. Podcasts and documentaries dissect cold cases with forensic precision, as if solving the puzzle could somehow rebalance the scales. It's a secular version of medieval relic hunts, collecting fragments of tragedy to ward off chaos. The gibbets promised order through visibility. Our binge-watching does the same, substituting autopsy photos for YouTube deep dives. But just as some cultures displayed the dead to terrify the living, others sought to revive them. In 19th century Europe, corpse galvanism experiments used electricity to make executed criminals' limbs twitch, a grotesque pantomime of life that blurred the line between science and spectacle. Audiences gasped as jaws clenched and eyes flickered open, not realizing they were witnessing the birth of modern defibrillation. What began as morbid entertainment ultimately saved lives. This duality, using the dead to frighten or heal, reflects our own conflicted relationship with mortality. The gibbet cages said, "Never forget." The galvanized corpses whispered, "What if?" Today, cryonics and brain preservation projects chase that same question, trading iron chains for liquid nitrogen. The goal isn't so different from those medieval crowds gawking at twitching fingers. Both are desperate to believe that death isn't the end, that the body might yet rise. Perhaps that's why the gibbets fascinate us. They're not just historical footnotes, they're mirrors. When we share a mugshot or dissect a killer's motives, we're still building cages, just digital ones. And when we freeze brains or reanimate cells, we're still reaching for the same spark that made those long-dead muscles jerk. The tools have changed, but the hunger remains, to punish, to understand, to cheat the reaper just a little longer. And then there were those who took revival literally. In Haiti, Bocas spoke of zombifying the dead with potions, a fear so potent it inspired real-life precautions. Families buried loved ones with bells or weapons, not unlike the safety coffins of Victorian England. The common thread, a terror that the departed might return, not as saints or spirits, but as hollowed-out versions of themselves. It's a fear that haunts modern medicine too. Think of coma patients waking with memories intact but personalities erased. The zombie myth and the gibbet cage are two sides of the same coin. One fears the dead walking, the other ensures they never will. So the next time you pause at a true crime documentary or gawk at a viral scandal, ask yourself, are we so different from those medieval crowds pointing at the bones above the road? The stage has changed, but the audience remains, and the show, it seems, must go on. In the frozen hinterlands of Iceland, where winter winds howl like restless spirits, there exists a legend so bizarre it blurs the line between folklore and financial desperation. The Nabrok, or Necropants, were exactly what they sound like: trousers meticulously crafted from the skin of a dead man, worn alive to conjure endless wealth. The ritual was horrifyingly specific. You had to secure permission from the deceased before burial, skin them from waist down in one unbroken piece, then wear the gruesome garment next to your own flesh. A stolen coin placed in the scrotum would supposedly multiply indefinitely, turning the wearer into a walking mint. But there was a catch: you could never remove the pants or face calamity. This wasn't just superstition, it was capitalism distilled into its most grotesque form. The Necropants legend exploded during Iceland's economic catastrophes, when crop failures and Danish trade monopolies pushed farmers to the brink. Sound familiar? Swap human skin for pyramid schemes or crypto scams, and the pattern holds. Every economic desperation breeds its own mythology of easy money, whether it's 17th century peasants gambling with corpses or modern influencers peddling financial freedom courses. The Necropants were Iceland's version of Buy My e-book, just with higher stakes and far messier collateral. What's revealing isn't the ritual itself, but the psychological toll it exposed. Icelandic folklore warned that Necropants wearers grew increasingly isolated, their souls withering as their pockets grew heavier. The same isolation haunts today's hustle culture, where grind-set mentalities often lead to burnout and loneliness. The legend's insistence on eternal wear, no removal, no respite, mirrors modern workaholism's trap. The more you earn, the harder it is to stop. Yet the Necropants weren't the only Icelandic ritual to weaponize silence. Across the island, mourners were sometimes forbidden to speak the names of the dead aloud, fearing it would summon them. Families whispered in code or used nicknames, a practice called utbyrðr, to avoid attracting unwanted attention from the spirit world. This cultural muzzle on grief finds eerie parallels in modern, toxic positivity, where expressions of sorrow are dismissed as bringing down the vibe. From Victorian-era Stoicism to corporate wellness seminars urging employees to focus on the positive, societies have always found ways to bury discomfort under forced smiles. The contrast between these rituals, one demanding endless gain, the other enforcing endless restraint, reflects a deeper tension. Necropants promised wealth at the cost of humanity. Utbyrðr demanded emotional suppression at the cost of healing. Both were survival strategies, born of environments so harsh they twisted natural impulses into something monstrous. Today's version might not involve flayed skin or named taboos, but the pressures remain. How many people still hide grief to appear professional? How many chase wealth at the expense of everything else? perhaps the most haunting lesson lies in how these rituals collapsed under their own contradictions. Necropants wearers allegedly went mad from the unending noise of clinking coins, a poetic indictment of greed's insanity. Meanwhile, suppressed grief in Iceland resurfaced as depression or huldufólk, hidden people delusions, proof that silence doesn't erase pain, it just sends it underground. So the next time you see a get-rich-quick ad or hear someone say, "Just stay positive," remember the necropants and the unspoken dead. Some myths never die, they just swap skin for suits and corpses for corporate jargon. The real horror isn't the old rituals, it's how little we've outgrown them. In Victorian England, death wasn't just mourned, it was muffled. Church bells rang with cloth-wrapped clappers to dampen their sound. Mirrors were draped in black crepe to prevent spirits from escaping the glass. Even the dead themselves were often posed in lifelike positions, dressed in their finest as if merely sleeping. These weren't arbitrary customs, they were part of a rigid choreography of repression, a society-wide performance where grief was expected to be as quiet and contained as the corpses it honored. The Victorians didn't just bury their dead, they buried the messiness of mourning under layers of propriety. At first glance, this seems worlds apart from modern attitudes. But replace crepe-covered mirrors with Instagram posts that insist good vibes only, and the parallel snaps into focus. The Victorian obsession with proper grief, stoic, subdued, and above all, invisible mirrors today's toxic positivity, where expressions of sorrow are met with rushed reassurances to stay strong or look on the bright side. Both cultures share an unspoken rule: sadness is acceptable only if it's decorative, fleeting, and doesn't inconvenience anyone. A widow's black veil was the 19th century equivalent of muting your grief on social media, a way to signal loss without actually disturbing the peace. Yet the Victorians took suppression further still. Some families went so far as to erase the dead entirely, burning letters, dismantling estates, even scratching names off gravestones. The goal wasn't just to move on, it was to obliterate any trace that the person had existed at all. This extreme form of forgetting finds eerie echoes in modern digital habits. Think of the delete button hovering over a deceased loved one's social media profile. Do you memorialize or wipe their online presence clean? The Victorians would have understood the impulse. When grief feels unbearable, sometimes annihilation seems easier than acceptance, but not all cultures treated silence as sacred. In contrast to the hush of Victorian parlours, the Maori of New Zealand practiced tangi, where mourners gathered for days, weeping openly and sharing stories until exhaustion brought catharsis. Where Victorians saw grief as a private malfunction, the Maori framed it as communal alchemy, a process that couldn't be rushed or hidden. The difference. One culture feared grief's disruption, the other trusted its necessity. This tension between remembrance and erasure plays out in modern funeral trends. Companies like Eternova compress ashes into diamonds, turning loss into something wearable but discreet, a far cry from Victorian mourning brooches woven with the hair of the dead. Both are attempts to keep the departed close, yet one flaunts grief while the other miniaturizes it. Even the rise of quiet graves, unmarked plots or natural burials with no headstone reflects this duality. Are we honoring a wish for simplicity or quietly conceding to society's discomfort with visible sorrow? Perhaps the most revealing Victorian ritual was the post-mortem photograph, where corpses were propped up alongside living relatives, their eyes painted open to simulate life. These images weren't just mementos, they were desperate acts of revision, as if a convincing enough tableau could trick death itself. Today's version might be AI-generated messages from the departed or deepfake videos that animate old photos. The technology dazzles, but the yearning remains unchanged. If we can just make the absence feel less absolute, maybe the pain will be too. So the next time you hesitate to mention a loved one's name for fear of bringing down the mood, or scroll past a friend's grief post with a quick heart emoji instead of words, remember the muted bells and scratched-off headstones. The tools have changed, but the silence hasn't, and the real question isn't why we hide grief, it's who that silence truly serves. In the heart of ancient Rome, a punishment worse than execution awaited those who fell from grace, not just death, but obliteration. The Senate's decree of damnatio memoriae, condemnation of memory, meant every trace of a disgraced emperor would be systematically annihilated. Statues were toppled, inscriptions chiseled away, even coins melted down to purge their likeness from history. When Emperor Geta angered his brother Caracalla in the 3rd century, his face was scraped from family portraits so thoroughly that some paintings now show only a ghostly blank space where he once stood. This wasn't just erasure, it was a ritual of uncreation, as if removing a name could undo the person entirely. Fast forward to today, and the tools have upgraded from chisels to algorithms. Social media platforms memory hole controversial figures, vanishing posts and profiles with the swipe of a moderator's finger. Politicians airbrush rivals from official photos. Streaming services pull shows starring cancelled celebrities. The mechanisms are digital, but the impulse is Roman, to sanitize history by deleting its discomforts. The eerie part, both systems share the same fatal flaw. Just as archaeologists still find Geta's defaced coins in riverbeds, today's deleted tweets resurface in screenshots, and cancelled voices often return under new brands. Try as we might, the past refuses to stay buried. Yet for all their brutality, the Romans understood something modern culture often forgets. Erasure isn't passive. It's an active, labor-intensive ritual. Workers had to hunt down every inscription, every bust, every coin die. Today's version might involve mass reporting campaigns or algorithmic deplatforming, but the energy expended is the same. The difference lies in scale. Where Rome's condemnations targeted individuals, digital memory holes can swallow entire movements until a hard drive in someone's basement exhumes them years later. This tension between destruction and preservation bled into other Roman death rituals, ones meant to protect the living. Families buried loved ones with depictions, lead curse tablets that pinned restless spirits to the underworld. These weren't just superstitions, they were legal documents addressed to Pluto himself, binding the dead like supernatural restraining orders. The logic was starkly practical. If you couldn't trust the living to behave, why risk it with the dead? Modern parallels lurk in plain sight. Consider non-disclosure agreements, legal spells that silence the living to protect the powerful, or the way whistleblowers are metaphorically buried by smear campaigns. The tools have changed from lead tablets to lawsuits, but the goal remains identical. Control the narrative by controlling who gets to speak. Even our digital habits mirror this duality. We delete ex-partners from photos, yet archive their messages, simultaneously cursing and preserving, just like those Roman families who both feared and longed for their ancestors' presence. Perhaps the most poignant twist lies in how damnatio memoriae sometimes backfired. Some Romans secretly preserved condemned emperors' statues, hiding them in basements or river mud. Today, fans archive cancelled artists' work on hard drives or private servers. Both acts whisper the same rebellious truth. No matter how tightly authority tries to curate history, someone will always hoard the fragments. Which raises an unsettling question. When we scrub a name from public view, whether with chisels or censorship tools, are we protecting society or just performing a ritual to soothe our own fears? The Romans believed erasure could neutralize threats. We pretend deletion equals accountability. but the ghosts have a way of returning, sometimes more powerful for having been forgotten. After all, it's hard to kill what's already been erased. The silence itself keeps them alive, so the next time you see a statue toppled or a profile suspended, remember the blank spaces in Roman portraits. The void speaks louder than the image ever could, and the real ritual isn't the destruction, it's the collective shudder that follows, the unspoken agreement to pretend we've forgotten what we still see every time we close our eyes. In the quiet villages of ancient Japan, mourners would sometimes place polished bronze mirrors inside graves, not for vanity, but as traps. These mirror burials served a singular, unsettling purpose: to confuse the spirits of the dead by surrounding them with endless reflections of themselves. Shinto tradition held that a person's soul could linger in their reflection, and a mirror could capture or distort that essence. By filling a tomb with reflective surfaces, the living hoped to disorient the departed, leaving them too bewildered to find their way back to the world of the living. It was a spiritual maze crafted from light and illusion, an ancient predecessor to today's Hall of Mirrors, where the threat isn't ghosts but the relentless gaze of modern surveillance. Consider how this mirrors, quite literally, our own anxieties about being watched. Today's security cameras, smartphone trackers, and facial recognition software create a world where our reflections multiply endlessly in digital space. Just as the Japanese feared spirits becoming trapped in bronze, we worry about our data being captured and manipulated in algorithms. The parallel is uncanny. Both rituals reveal a deep-seated fear of losing control over one's own image. Even the language overlaps. We speak of mirror worlds in virtual reality and reflections in AI-generated deepfakes, terms that echo Shinto warnings about the soul's fragility in the face of duplication. Yet the mirror burials held another layer of meaning. In some traditions, the reflections weren't just barriers, they were judges. A spirit forced to confront its own distorted image might reckon with unresolved guilt or shame, a concept that resonates with modern psychology's emphasis on self-awareness. The Japanese even had a term for this, kagami no kokoro, or the mirror of the heart, suggesting that reflections could reveal inner truths. Today's version might be the curated personas we construct online, where filters and carefully crafted posts become funhouse mirrors of our real lives. The difference, where ancient mourners used mirrors to protect the living from the dead, we now use them to shield ourselves from uncomfortable truths. This tension between reflection and deception bled into broader Japanese death rituals, particularly those addressing communal guilt. In the Chukan-hai ceremonies, entire villages would gather to honor unnamed war dead, acknowledging collective responsibility for lives lost in conflict. The rituals weren't about individual blame but shared atonement, a concept that feels strikingly relevant in an era of #activism and public reckonings. When a corporation issues a generic apology or a community grapples with historical injustice, the dynamic isn't so different from those village gatherings. Both are attempts to confront the past without fully dismantling the present. The most haunting twist, some mirror burials included shinkaio, sacred mirrors believed to hold the essence of deities. These weren't just tools for confusion, they were vessels for transcendence, objects that could, in the right circumstances, elevate a soul rather than trap it. Herein lies the paradox: the same technology that distorts can also clarify, that terrifies can also liberate. It's a duality we're still navigating. Security cameras invade privacy but solve crimes. Social media warps self-image yet connects isolated souls. The mirrors in those graves held both possibilities, barriers and bridges, just as our modern tools do. So the next time you pass a surveillance camera or catch your reflection in a screen, remember the bronze mirrors gathering dust in forgotten tombs. the question they pose hasn't faded. When our images multiply endlessly, who controls what they reveal? The Japanese might have said it depends on whether the mirror is a weapon, a judge, or a shrine. And perhaps that's the real ritual, not in the burial, but in deciding how we face our own reflections every day. In the misty valleys of Wales, where churchyards clung to hillsides like lichen to stone, a peculiar figure once lurked at funerals, the Sin Eater. Hired from among the poorest outcasts, this solitary soul would crouch beside the dead, a crust of bread placed upon the corpse's chest. As mourners whispered prayers, the Sin Eater would devour the bread, believing they'd swallowed not just food but the deceased's lifetime of transgressions. The ritual was transactional, a few coins for a clean celestial slate, the weight of sin transferred from privileged corpse to starving stranger. It was spiritual alchemy at its most grotesque, converting hunger into absolution. What's chilling isn't just the ritual itself, but how neatly it mirrors modern scapegoating. Replace bread with blame, and the Sin Eater becomes the disgraced CEO fired to appease shareholders, the influencer cancelled to soothe collective outrage. The mechanics are identical. Identify an expendable party, load them with symbolic guilt, then banish them so the rest can feel purified. Even the payment echoes today's sacrificial lambs often receive severance packages or viral notoriety instead of coins, but the trade-off remains: take the fall and we'll let you eat. Yet sin eating wasn't just about blame shifting, it was about closure. By materializing sin as something tangible, something that could be consumed and digested, communities created the illusion of control over morality itself. The same psychological sleight of hand fuels today's atonement industries, from luxury wellness retreats promising to cleanse your karma, to apps that gamify apologies with digital forgiveness points. We've commercialized the age-old hunger for absolution. The Welsh used bread, we use bullet journaling and therapy speak, but the craving is unchanged to believe wrongs can be quantified, then cancelled like a debt. The most haunting detail: sin eaters were forbidden from entering homes through doors. They crawled through windows or back entrances, their very presence marked as contaminating. This literal marginalization finds its parallel in modern deplatforming, where controversial figures are funneled to shadowy corners of the internet or barred from mainstream spaces. The message is the same: guilt is contagious, and those who carry it must be kept at arm's length, close enough to serve their purpose, but never truly part of the community. Transitioning from consumption to suspension, some cultures took the opposite approach to sin, not absorbing it, but delaying its consequences. Across medieval Europe, certain corpses were denied prompt burial, left to rest in temporary charnel houses or on straw beds for weeks. The logic was stark: if the soul couldn't depart until the body decayed, slowing decomposition might buy time for prayers to work. These weren't just practical delays, they were theological installment plans, bargaining chips against divine judgment. Today's version plays out in legal systems and hospital wards, death sentences deferred by appeals, life support machines humming as families await miracles. The tools have medicalized, but the hope remains superstitious, that with enough time, enough procedure, the inevitable might still be cheated. Even our digital afterlives reflect this stalling tactic. Social media accounts hover in memorialized limbo. Emails from the dead linger in inboxes unread. We've swapped straw beds for server farms, but the impulse is identical: postpone the goodbye, and maybe it won't hurt as much. The Sin Eater and the delayed burial represent two sides of humanity's oldest dilemma: how to live with what we've done and what we've lost. One ritual tries to eat the past, the other tries to outrun it. Both, in their way, are acts of incredible faith, not in gods or ghosts, but in the fragile idea that we can fix what's already broken, the bread molders. The body decays, yet still we bargain, still we believe. Maybe that's the real ritual, not the act itself, but the stubbornness that keeps us reaching for solutions we know, deep down, will never be enough. Deep in Siberia's permafrost, where temperatures plunge low enough to stop time itself, lie bodies so perfectly preserved their eyelashes still glisten with ice. These aren't modern cryonics experiments, they're ancient corpses, some over 2,000 years old, their skin still tattooed with intricate symbols, their last meals undigested in their stomachs. The Pazyryk people buried their dead in these frozen tombs intentionally, packing burial chambers with ice and sealing them against the summer thaw. What's haunting isn't just the preservation, it's how these icy graves foreshadow today's race to cheat death through technology. Silicon Valley billionaires invest millions in cryogenic freezing, hoping future science will revive their preserved brains, while AI companies train algorithms to mimic the speech patterns of the deceased. The through line is undeniable. Whether through permafrost or liquid nitrogen, humanity keeps searching for a pause button on mortality. But the Siberian ice mum reveals something cryonics enthusiasts often overlook: preservation doesn't guarantee revival. Many Pazyryk bodies show signs of elaborate postmortem rituals, organs removed, muscles sliced to fold the corpse into fetal positions, even symbolic kill marks on the skin to ensure the spirit wouldn't linger. These weren't passive freezes, they were carefully orchestrated transitions, acknowledging that stopping decay was only half the battle. Modern cryonics faces similar ethical quandaries. If we succeed in reviving a frozen brain centuries from now, what memories or identity will remain? Will they wake as themselves or as strangers in an alien world? The Pazyryk people seem to understand something we're still grappling with: that preservation without context is just another form of burial. This tension between science and symbolism bleeds into contemporary debates about digital resurrection. Startups like Project December now offer AI chatbots trained on a person's texts and emails, allowing living users to converse with the dead. Like the Pazyryk tattoos meant to guide spirits in the afterlife, these algorithms create the illusion of continuity. But is it comfort or deception? The frozen corpses of Siberia wore their stories on their skin. Our digital ghosts wear code. Both rituals dance around the same unanswerable question: can you truly preserve a person, or just the shadow they cast? Yet not all cultures sought to stall decay. Some accelerated it through symbolic deaths. In Papua New Guinea's Sambia tribe, boys underwent grueling initiation rites where they were killed ritually before being reborn as men, forced to ingest substances that made them vomit violently, purging their childhood identities. The ancient Greeks celebrated the Eleusinian mysteries, where initiates drank a psychedelic brew that simulated death and rebirth. These weren't about preserving the body but transforming the self, trading physical permanence for spiritual metamorphosis. The contrast is stark. Siberia's frozen mummies and Silicon Valley's cryo tanks cling to the hope that the self can survive unchanged, while initiation rites embrace death as the necessary price of growth. One tradition fears the end, the other wields it as a tool, yet both whisper the same truth: that our relationship with mortality isn't just about fear. It's about the stories we tell ourselves to make the unbearable feel temporary. Whether we bury our dead in ice or code, in fetal curls or hallucinogenic visions, every ritual is a rebellion against the idea that dust is the only ending. So the next time you hear about a new immortality project or watch a documentary about digital avatars, remember the tattoos on those Siberian skin. They didn't just preserve a body, they told a story. And the real question isn't whether we can freeze or fake our way out of death, but whether any ritual, ancient or algorithmic, can ever truly prepare us to let go. In a quiet Seoul office building, a young woman lies in an open casket, listening as her co-workers deliver tearful eulogies. This isn't a tragedy, it's a choice. South Korea's living funerals have surged in popularity, with participants paying to experience their own deaths, writing wills, donning burial shrouds, even sealing themselves in coffins for minutes that feel like lifetimes. One college student described the moment the lid closed. Not darkness, but clarity. All the noise in my head just stopped. These mock funerals aren't morbid spectacles. They're radical wake-up calls, stripping away the distractions of modern life to confront the one truth we all avoid. None of us get out alive. The parallels to near-death tourism are striking. Just as visitors flock to Thailand's Buddhist temples to meditate on skeletal remains or trek to Mexico's Day of the Dead celebrations, living funerals commodify mortality as a form of shock therapy. But where those traditions externalize death through art or symbolism, Korea's version turns the lens inward. Participants emerge with stories that sound eerily similar to near-death experiences, reports of time slowing, petty grudges dissolving, even visions of light. The difference: no ambulance ride required. It's death stripped of permanence but packed with perspective. What's revealing isn't just the ritual itself, but who seeks it out. Overworked office employees, burned-out millennials, even terminally ill patients, all drawn to the same paradoxical promise: to live better by rehearsing the end. The ceremonies often include bucket list workshops where participants scribble dreams on post-it notes, learn violin, forgive my sister, swim in bioluminescent water. The effect is alchemical, transforming abstract mortality into concrete urgency. As one funeral director observed, people don't fear death, they fear the things death will take from them before they're ready. Yet this ritual has deeper cultural roots than its New Age veneer suggests. Korea's suicide rate, long among the world's highest, has fueled a national reckoning with mental health. Living funerals didn't emerge from wellness trends but from desperation, offering a sanctioned space to die symbolically rather than literally. The catharsis comes not from escaping life but from resetting it. After her mock funeral, one participant quit her toxic job, another reconnected with estranged parents. The ritual works because it hijacks the brain's survival instinct, facing death to rediscover what makes life worth preserving. Transitioning from rehearsal to reality, other cultures ritualize final journeys not as metaphors but as literal passages. In Varanasi, India, the elderly sometimes migrate to riverside hospices to die where the Ganges can carry their ashes toward enlightenment. The Ainu people of Japan historically sent elders adrift on small boats, their bodies becoming offerings to the sea. Both traditions frame death as a voyage, whether spiritual or physical, rather than an abrupt stop. The contrast with Korea's living funerals is illuminating. Where the Ainu launched their loved ones toward horizons, Korean participants step back into their lives with fresh eyes. One isn't better than the other, they're complementary answers to the same human puzzle. How do you prepare for an ending when you don't know the date? Some cultures practice letting go, others practice holding on tighter. Both, in their way, are acts of love for the lives we have and the lives we might still shape before the curtain falls. Perhaps that's the real power of these rituals. They don't just confront mortality, they redefine it. Death stops being a distant specter and becomes a collaborator, whispering the same urgent question in every language. If today were your last, what would you stop pretending not to see? The answer, whether scribbled on a Korean post-it note or carried by the Ganges current, always points back to the living, twisting through the English countryside like frayed ribbons. corpse roads were never meant for the living. These labyrinthine paths, sometimes called coffin ways or lich ways, forced funeral processions into dizzying detours, crossing streams backward or zigzagging between hedgerows in seemingly nonsensical patterns. The logic was supernatural GPS. A spirit could only travel in straight lines, so a winding route trapped the dead in endless loops, forever circling but never arriving. Imagine the terror behind such careful choreography, entire villages conspiring to mislead ghosts who might otherwise follow their own footsteps home. These roads weren't just folklore, they were early horror world building. Many followed ancient ley lines or avoided fairy rings, layering pagan caution onto Christian burial rites. A particularly infamous path in Dartmoor required crossing running water 49 times, not for practicality, but because odd numbers were considered magically disruptive. The same principle echoes in modern horror tropes: the ghost who can't cross salt lines, the vampire repelled by threshold rituals. Every "don't look in the mirror at midnight" superstition owes a debt to Corpse Road's meticulous rule-making. Yet the fear these paths embodied wasn't just about ghosts, it was about borders. Corpse roads often marked parish boundaries, physically separating consecrated ground from the unconsecrated. In death as in life, society insisted on categorizing, on drawing lines between us and them. Today's version might be gated communities with motion-activated lights or algorithms that filter undesirable content. The tools have upgraded from folk magic to firmware, but the compulsion remains. Define the danger, then build a maze to contain it. Urban legends continue the tradition with eerie precision. Phantom hitchhikers who vanish at county lines, haunted highways where headlights reveal invisible walkers. These tales update Corpse Road logic for the asphalt age. Even the vanishing hitchhiker's inevitable disappearance at a specific landmark mirrors the coffin way's reliance on ritual boundaries, the most telling parallel. Both rely on movement. Unlike static haunted houses, these horrors are encountered in transit, making the road itself the antagonist. What's revealing is how these stories shift with transportation technology. 18th century folktales warned of specters dragging stagecoaches into ditches. 20th century versions featured ghostly brake failures on rainy turns. Now, electric cars inspire new myths: phantom battery drains, GPS systems hijacked by backseat ghosts. The medium changes, but the underlying anxiety stays frozen in place. That moment when control slips, when the path you chose stops obeying the rules. Perhaps that's why these rituals resonate. A Corpse Road's twists were the original terms of service, a contract with the unseen, full of arbitrary clauses designed to outsmart forces no one truly understood. Modern life is no different. We still create elaborate detours around discomfort, still whisper rules to ward off chaos. Never check your phone at 3 a.m. Always knock before entering a hotel room. The rituals have softened, but the impulse is Neolithic. After all, what's a privacy setting if not a digital Corpse Road, forcing data-hungry spirits to take the long way round? So the next time your GPS recalculates for no reason, or you take an unnecessary turn to avoid a darkened alley, remember those coffin bearers trudging their deliberate zigzags. We're still laying traps for ghosts, we just call them shortcuts now. And if you listen closely on certain misty nights, you might hear the echo of centuries-old footsteps, still lost, still searching for a straight path home. We may not nail coffins shut or weigh them down with stones anymore, but the rituals we've crafted for the 21st century still hum with the same ancient anxieties, just dressed in biodegradable shrouds and Wi-Fi signals. Take green burials, where bodies return to the earth in simple cotton shrouds or mushroom suits designed to accelerate decomposition. On the surface, it's a far cry from the iron-bound caskets of the Victorian era, but dig deeper and the parallels emerge. Those mushroom suits, they're the modern answer to tethering the dead end, ensuring the body dissolves efficiently so the spirit won't linger. The fear isn't vampires anymore, it's environmental harm, a guilt so pervasive we've swapped stakes for sustainability. Then there's the rise of digital memorials where grief migrates to the cloud. Platforms like Forever Identity use AI to animate old photos, letting users chat with avatars of the departed. It's a technological twist on the Victorian post-mortem photograph. Only now, the dead don't just look alive, they text back. But beneath the innovation lies an age-old terror, the horror of vanishing without a trace. Just as Neolithic cultures painted ochre on skeletons to preserve their essence, we scrape data from social media to keep digital ghosts active. The tools are sleeker, but the desperation is identical, to outrun oblivion by any means necessary. Perhaps the most telling evolution is the space funeral. Companies like Celesti's launch cremated remains into orbit, offering families the chance to reach the stars. It's a direct descendant of Viking ship burials where flaming longships carried warriors to Valhalla. Both rituals frame death as a journey, but where the Norse relied on myth, we trust physics. The rockets even look like ships, streamlined and arrow-straight, modern versions of dragon-proud vessels. Yet for all their engineering, these space burials still grapple with the same existential itch, the need to believe the departed are somewhere, even if that somewhere is the cold void of space. What's revealing is how these modern rituals commodify ancient fears. Green burials market themselves as eco-friendly, but they're also selling relief from the dread of being a burden. Digital memorials promise connection, but they're really peddling the illusion of control over loss, over time, over the unbearable silence of a voice you'll never hear again. Even space funerals, for all their futurism, cater to a primal urge to imagine the dead not as gone, but as travelers on a grand adventure. The irony. Technology hasn't erased our terror of the unknown. It's just given us new vocabulary to describe it. We don't fear Draugr or vengeful spirits anymore. We worry about data breaches in memorial apps or rockets exploding before they leave the atmosphere. The threats have rebranded, but the heartbeat of fear remains, and so we find ourselves back where we started, stacking stones, lighting fires, whispering into the dark. The mediums change, but the message doesn't. Whether we bury our dead in soil, code, or the stratosphere, every ritual is a flare shot into the night, pleading for an answer that never comes. The real continuity isn't in the tools we use, it's in the trembling hands that hold them. From sky burials to sin eaters, vampire stakes to digital avatars, these 24 rituals form a mirror, one that reflects not just the dead, but the living who buried them. Strip away the centuries, the cultural costumes, the shifting technologies, and you'll find the same trembling hand reaching across time. The fear of being forgotten, the terror of what waits in the dark, the desperate need to believe we can control the uncontrollable. Modernity hasn't erased these fears, it's just given them new names. The medieval peasant who nailed a shroud to a coffin, and the Silicon Valley executive cryogenically freezing their brain are wrestling with the same ghost, the unbearable thought that one day they'll cease to matter. Consider how these rituals expose our most vulnerable seams. The safety coffins with their bells and breathing tubes, they're not about the dead at all, they're about the living's terror of being trapped, unheard, abandoned. The catacombs, saints glittering in gold, a confession that we still worship at the altar of spectacle, mistaking visibility for immortality. Even the green burials and digital memorials, for all their progress, betray the same ancient ache. If we can't stop death, maybe we can at least make it mean something. A funeral director once told me, "We bury our dead, but never our fears." That's the thread connecting the Pazyryk ice mummies to today's AI chatbots mimicking lost loved ones. We dress our dread in different garments, sometimes linen shrouds, sometimes lines of code, but the body beneath remains unchanged. The rituals evolve, but the nightmare doesn't, that in the end we'll be alone with the thing we cannot name. So here's the real question these graves whisper across time. Which fear still walks with you? Is it the claustrophobia of the safety coffin, the silence of the sin-eater's feast, or the dizzying maze of the corpse road? Drop a comment below, tell us which ritual crawled under your skin, and if you're ready to face more of history's shadows, hit subscribe. The past isn't done with us yet. Because the truth is, we're all just building our own versions of ghost walls, stacking stones, writing wills, coding memorials, hoping against hope that when the darkness comes, someone will remember how to